All right, we've sorted out the sound now. Let's continue our interview now with the Premier of the Western Cape, Helen Zille, who found out yesterday that her suspension from the party has come into effect pending this disciplinary hearing. Okay, so Premier, again, thank you, and I'm glad we managed to sort the sound out. We understand, and I suppose you've given the reasons comparing South Africa to Singapore, but surely, as a politician, you understand that the conditions here in South Africa are very, very different, and perhaps people are not necessarily understanding what you meant. And taking to Twitter to say things like that is not very politician-like, if I can say that.
Well, I have lots of conversations with lots of my followers all the time, every day on every issue. And almost every single country in the world has been through an experience of colonialism at some point or another. Now, that was terrible. Colonialism was abominable. It can't be defended. But the difference between different countries is how they've managed to deal with the legacy of the past. And I think that that is one of the debates that we need to be having in South Africa.
Do you not think that what you're doing right now in coming out and still defending this tweet of yours and not necessarily coming through and apologising as party leader Mmusi Maimane is trying to get from you, you're damaging the reputation of the DA?
This is really weird because I've apologised unreservedly twice.
But you don't regret it. You don't regret what you said.
When you apologise, you do regret it. When you apologise, you do regret it.
Surely,
I mean,
then
this is
you
quite extraordinary. I have apologised twice, unreservedly, once in Parliament, so I'm afraid that there is no truth to the allegation that I won't or have not apologised.
Surely revoking the tweet would probably be the best course of action, and saying that you did make a mistake when you said that. But in saying so, it seems that you're constantly justifying why you have said what you said.
The bottom line is this: colonialism was terrible. Every single historian on the subject has made the point that the legacy of colonialism is mixed. And that is something we have to debate. We can't simply close down uncomfortable debates by vilifying people, by lying, by calling them a racist. In South Africa, we have to learn to debate difficult issues. Otherwise, there's no pathway into the future.
Let's have a look at some of the critics that are speaking out against you. And when I say some of the critics, I'm talking about some of your great friends and some of your great fans as well. People are not taking away from what you've actually done for the party, and that's a very, very big thing. But let's just, for instance, take a look at what veteran anti-apartheid journalist Max du Preez has to say. I mean, he wrote an open letter to you, both acknowledging all that you've done and the role that you played as an activist and all the good things that you've done as a politician. But he also says, and let me quote what he goes on to say: "Please call it all off. Make a gracious speech and retire before you do more damage to yourself, your party, and the exciting efforts of so many citizens to rewrite the compact between state and citizen." What's your response to somebody like that, Max du Preez, a friend of yours?
Well, Max du Preez is a commentator, and I read commentators. I haven't read that particular article. And I analyse them, and sometimes I think they make good points, and sometimes I think they don't make good points. But analysts have never been in government, and analysts have never tried to land a policy into a practical plan and implement it. So there's a difference between being in my space and his space. He's operating on some information. I'm operating on perhaps a deeper set of insights in government. And he's very, very entitled to his opinion and entitled to express it. And I'm entitled to process it in the way that I believe is best, to take advice from other people and to proceed in the best way that I can in the circumstances.
The other issue, and I'd like to bring it up with you because I think that you have mentioned it as well in some of your comments as well. You feel that as a white person in the DA, it's almost a disadvantage to you, that had this been said by a black party member, it wouldn't have been taken up so badly. Bringing race into it, and particularly from your side, it's something that you've always sort of pushed to the side and rather led as a leader and not as a white leader, but you're now bringing race into it. Why did you feel that you needed to say something like that, that as a white member this has held it against you in a very bad way?
Well, if you look objectively at the issue at stake, and you look at everyone who has made exactly the same point, Moeletsi Mbeki has said so far more forcibly. In fact, he said that Africa was better under colonialism, which I don't believe and which I would never ever say. There was no fuss when he said that. Kenneth Kaunda said the same thing. Of course, Nelson Mandela said the same thing. All our school textbooks say the same thing. So it's quite extraordinary that when I say it, it creates all this fuss. So I'm asking why? What is the difference? And I can only come to one conclusion.
Yeah. A very serious question to ask you is that surely you know where we are at as a country right now. We're at a very difficult position where the DA did exceptionally well during the local government elections. We've got the national elections coming up in 2019, and many people are expecting great things from the party as well. And yet, this internal feud that's happening right now, the reputation of the DA is almost being pulled across the coals. Surely you do understand this. And right now, many people I know, and you've answered this question before, that you're putting your ego before the party. Do you not feel that politically this is the right move for you to hang up your boots and say, I've done the best I can, let me move on?
I did do that in the DA 2 years ago. I hung up my boots in the DA and stepped down as the leader. And now I am finishing a mandate given to me by the voters of the Western Cape, who consciously gave me a very increased mandate in 2014 to do a job of work. And that ends in 2 years' time, and I intend to finish that mandate. I am not a leader in the DA, I have no role in the DA, and it's absolutely appropriate that I finish a mandate given to me by the voters of the Western Cape. That has nothing to do with ego.
Yeah. Just in terms of what's happening in your province at the moment as Premier of the Western Cape, because that you still remain in the position of Premier, a lot of people again criticising the fact that you're too focused on this political career of yours and the suspension as opposed to what's happening in the province, whether we're talking about fires that are devastating Knysna and the floods that happened yesterday, but every time we see you on TV, you're defending yourself as opposed to calling out to the province. Do you have a response to that as well? Perhaps you'd like to talk about what's happening in your province?
That's a real irony. I wish you'd asked me about what's happening in the province. When I appear on TV, you're always looking at peripheral issues like the tweets that were made 2 months ago. I spent almost all night last night dealing with the fires in Knysna, dealing with the weather conditions. I focus on those all the time. This issue is entirely peripheral to me, this issue of the tweets and all of that kind of thing, but it seems absolutely highly relevant to all of you. So why don't you ask me questions about the real issues like the fire and floods that I spent all night dealing with?
All right, so let's get your response. What have you done all night? What are you doing for the residents of the Western Cape? Let's pick that up as a story.
Well, I'm trying to get to Knysna today, and I have been working all through the night on focusing on getting people out of Knysna, getting the bus system of George mobilised to get people out of Knysna, making sure that people were safe off the mountain, speaking to people, speaking to the emergency systems, trying to get the South African Air Force involved, all of those kinds of things.
All right, so you're making your way to Knysna. You're going to try and address that situation. I know that, Premier, you do have to leave us, and I'm going to pick up that story as our main story in the news bulletin. But I want to leave it on this note, and I just want to leave that final word with you. If the party decides that you are not fit to hold office, will you continue to support the DA? Will you, obviously you've thought about these things and you're not going to resign, but you will obviously abide by what the party wants from you.
Well, the party would only be able to decide that I was not fit to hold office if I'd in some way breached my oath of office, and they won't find that.
So, in other words, in your determination, you're going to stay on as a party member and as the Western Cape Premier with no intention of leaving whatsoever.
The bottom line is I'm doing my job. Last year, my department was voted, or not voted, but judged by the national government as the best department in the whole of South Africa, including all provincial and national departments. This is about doing a job of work. And that is what I intend to do. And debates are critical in politics. Tough debates are critical in South Africa. And it is really sad that we can't have them.
Yeah. Will you be fine to be working with the DA as Premier of the Western Cape, particularly in this very difficult position that you find yourself in now as the Western Cape? I know that the SANDF being called into Knysna. Are you going to get the assistance? Are relations fine for you within the DA?
I work professionally. I don't hold personal grudges. I get on and do a job of work, and I will continue doing a job of work and speaking out and having the tough debate South Africa needs to have, and not being tied down by what is seen as the politically correct notion of a particular point in history.
All right, we leave it there. The Premier of the Western Cape, that's Helen Zille, talking to us about her suspension and also talking to us about the problems that are ravaging the Western Cape right now. And let's pick that up as the top story. We're already 5 minutes into our news bulletin. The Western Cape is being battered by high winds and fire. Scores of Knysna residents were evacuated last night as fires threatened the coastal town. Officials say residents were evacuated from